Hello, friends. Welcome, welcome. We are so happy that you are here. We're going to give you a moment to get started, to settle down. And actually, I'm going to ask that you get started in a really fun way. I'm going to ask that you get a scrap piece of paper. It needs to be blank on one side, and you want something to write or draw with, anything you want. And when you do that on your scrap piece of paper or on your piece of paper, can you write or draw a game that you like to play? It can be any game. It can be a game that you play by yourself. It can be a game that you play with other people. It can be a game where you are lying down, sitting, standing, anything you want. But I would love for you to grab a piece of paper and on that piece of paper, write or draw a game that you like to play. Drawing is more fun. And it doesn't have to be a perfect drawing or a great drawing. It just can be any drawing that you'd like. So we're going to give you some time to do that. And then we are going to start really soon. But why don't you get started with this? Get thinking about games that you like to play. It's a game you are going to share with a couple other people. You're going to tell them about it. And so welcome, friends. And hope you enjoy getting your piece of paper. And that's what we're going to do. I'm going to put myself on mute for a moment so you can get yourselves organized as we do this. Fantastic. You can take your time still. You don't have to draw very quick. We're still gonna have more time to do your drawing, so you can draw with as much or as little detail. You can use as many words as you'd like. So you can write, but you don't have to, and you can draw, but you don't have to. Choose one way to talk about the game on your sheet of paper. I want you to write or draw a game that you like to play. Welcome to our new friends that just came. Good morning, everybody. We hope you had a wonderful weekend, that you had some time to have fun, that you got to play, which is all we're going to talk about today is play. And we're actually going to start our time together by asking you to get a piece of paper. Scrap is good. It doesn't have to be huge, but probably bigger than a Post-it note. And we want you to draw or write a game that you like to play. And you are going to share this game with another person. You're going to tell them about it. So welcome to our friends. We're going to have probably about 3 or 4 more minutes to do this. We want you to get a scrap piece of paper, probably bigger than a Post-it note, but it doesn't have to be huge. It needs one side maybe to be blank. And what I would love for you to do is to write or draw a game that you love to play, something that brings you joy, that you have fun doing. There's no right or wrong answer. It's totally up to you. And I would love for you to draw or write about a game that you love to play. So I'm gonna stop talking for a moment as you get settled, as you do your drawings or your writing. And we'll give you a couple moments to do this. So we're going to take 2 more minutes. If you still need to get your piece of paper, grab a piece of paper. Scrap is good. Doesn't have to be a brand new sheet of paper. You probably want it to be not a little paper, but it doesn't have to be a big sheet either. And you want to write or draw a game that you love to play, something that makes you laugh or brings you joy, or you really get into this game. What is a game that you really like to play? And so we're going to give you a couple more moments to do that and keep diving into our conversations. You want to take a little less than a minute, finish up your drawing or what you're writing. What is a game that you really like to play, that you enjoy playing? Because today we're talking all about play, and we want to start with you think about a game that you like to play. So you can write, you can draw it. What is a game that you like to play? And so finish up your drawing. And maybe we can ask all of our friends, maybe ask your teachers if you want to put 1 or 2 of the games in the chat. Would love to see what games you were talking about in your classes. What's a game that you really loves to play? So thank you all so much for coming today, for being here. We are so excited. I'm excited to talk about play together, because one of the ways that we can build our relationships and we can actually build community is through play. And sometimes we think that play is something that is light and it's not serious. And play doesn't have to be serious, but it can be very helpful to us. And so we want to make sure that we start our time together in a really good way with our land acknowledgement. And so I'm going to ask you to please do what you need to do to be present for our land acknowledgement. Maybe sit up, take a deep breath, plant your feet on the floor. And because we're coming from different places, we're going to talk about and acknowledge that that's what we're doing. And so we acknowledge that we are being hosted on distinct and diverse traditional territories of the First Nations and Métis where we live. And I think, which is where I work, we are on lands that are governed by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. The idea is that we can all peacefully live together, sharing one dish, this land, and all it provides, so long as we are mindful of only taking what we need. We recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. And one of the Indigenous authors that I have learned so much from, her name is Robin Wall Kimmerer. She wrote a really great book. And one of the things that she talks about in this book is this idea that names are the way we humans build relationships, not only with each other, but with the living world. And so I thought we could start our time thinking about that as we also meet with our guest today and hear from him, because we're going to be thinking about how is it that our names come into community? How is it that these things connect for one another? And how is it that we come into relationship together as people, but also with everything around us? And so I thought that Robin's words would be a really great way to ground our time together, to start our time, to get us thinking in a cool way with our guest. And I wanted to remind us that in our work together, as you're doing the super important work of thinking about community in your schools, that we think about community in this way. It's not just when we come together. It's not about being around other people, but we think about community where someone knows that they belong and are affirmed in all of their identities, and that where we have a responsibility to affirm others and to help other people know that they belong. And so I am so excited that today you're going to get to talk to Adil. Adil is somebody who I've been lucky enough to know for years now. I think we probably met maybe more than 10 years ago. And he's been doing such cool things in a community that I'm lucky enough to be a part of, that has really influenced that when we were thinking about who would be really fun to talk to, we could really high up on our list, top of our list. How do we think about play? And most importantly, as you're thinking about the adults in your school, how do we think about play for adults? Because a lot of times we think about play for kids, we think about play for young people, but what about the adults in your school? What might they need? How do we build empathy for them? And so we're going to dive right in. And instead of just having our guests talk about themselves, I'm going to ask them a couple of questions. And the first question is going to be one about the story of your name. And we know that our names carry stories. Some of our name stories can be really happy. Some of our name stories can carry a lot in our communities. And so I've asked Adil that I can ask him this question, that he's okay sharing with us. And that also there are days, just for all of you to know, that you may want to tell the stories of your names and days you don't, and that's also fine. But we got permission. We're going to dive right in. Adil, can you tell us the story of your name?
I'm happy to, and thanks, Noga, for the introduction. And hello, everyone, and good morning. It's truly a pleasure to be with you all today. My name was given to me by my grandfather, and unfortunately, he actually passed away shortly before I was born. So I actually didn't have the opportunity to ever ask him myself as to why he gave me my name. He had suggested my name to my parents prior to me being born, and then once he did pass, my parents felt a way to honor him was to give him the name that he wanted for me. Adil is an Arabic word, and it means just, as in justice. And as I mentioned, while I never got a chance to ask my grandfather his relationship to the word or the concept of justice, justice is something that's very important to me, and that I am continually trying to live up to that name and the spirit of it for my entire life. You can also call me Dil. Many people in my life call me Dil, and Dil in Hindi means heart. So my lineage actually is that of my ancestors were originally from Persia. Then they moved to India. Then they moved to Tanzania. And then my parents and grandparents came to Canada. And the Arabic part of my name is a reflection of our Muslim identity.
So many things we can learn from our names, and how much our names sometimes, not every time, but sometimes very much reflect in who we are. And so thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to ask Adil 3 more questions so that we can get to know him a little bit better. Can you tell us about a community that you feel that you belong to?
The community that came up immediately when you asked that question is my home. I think if you live with people, that is a community. And whether that's your friends, your parents, your siblings, etc. I live with 7 other people and a dog. And the living arrangement where a group of pretty grown adults like myself choose to live together is often described as collective living, or for short, co-living. And it's a form of living that is centered in the idea that when we live in community, there are advantages that exist as opposed to when we live alone. And so my wife, Shelby, and I moved in here into this home during the pandemic, and we've been living with community here for the last couple of years now.
And how does this community help you feel like you belong?
There are so many ways to answer that we one of the ways in a broad sense is that we share everything. Obviously, we share space, we share home, we share food, we share meals, we share tools. But one of the other things we share is chores. Things have to happen in the home, and we all have a conversation around what are the chores that need to be done and who wants to do what. The only rule, the only rule is you can't do a chore you hate. That's the only rule. And then we rotate based on that. But the thing I was thinking about in terms of what about that makes me feel like I belong is that sometimes I can get behind on my chores. Some of you may be able to relate. And instead of my homemates being annoyed with me or being upset with me, they ask me how they can help. And this has really facilitated my sense of belonging because they show care in their response. Obviously, I would like to keep up on top of my chores, but sometimes that isn't always possible. And the feeling that I'm surrounded by people who want to support me in completing my chores, as opposed to being annoyed with me that I can't do them, is a way that I feel a deep sense of belonging here.
And maybe a last introduction question is, how do you help the other people in your home community feel like they belong?
So I'm a community organizer, and the reason why I started as one is my parents were our community organizers. They met through organizing community, and I share that to say that I like to organize a lot of things, a lot of events, and something that I like to do or be involved in within the community of my home is I love organizing events for people's birthdays and other special occasions. I get a lot of joy in the design of a social gathering, of including people, of getting food, figuring out what music that we need, what design we want. It feels playful for me to create a party or an experience, and it's one of the ways that I feel like I'm able to really acknowledge someone else's belonging within our community.
Thank you so much for introducing yourself to us and our community here in a way that talks about the communities that you belong to and how you help do that. And like I said, we wanted to invite Dil here to share a little bit about some of the really cool work he's been doing around play, but also play for adults, because you're all having to think about the community of your school. And your school communities have a lot of young people, students like yourselves, but there are also a lot of adults in the community around you. And building empathy, thinking about who these adults are and what they might need in this community is going to be a part of what you think about as you think about the communities at your schools. And so this is what's going to happen. Dil is going to share with us a little bit about some of the work that he does. He's going to introduce this work. I might ask him a few questions, but that's really an excuse for all of you to think about the questions you have for him. And most of our time, he is going to spend answering your questions. So I'm going to turn the floor back to you. Please tell us about Reset. Tell us about what you do, why you do it. And folks, as you're listening, start jotting down questions that you have. And you can put it in the chat either while Dil is talking and we'll start answering them afterwards, or we'll give you a moment to think about what Dil has shared, and then you can write them in the chat afterwards. So you can listen right now if that's how you learn best. You can write and jot down thoughts and questions if that's how you learn best. It's completely up to you. And so with that, Dil, tell us about Reset.
Thanks, Noga. I'm gonna just turn on the slideshare right now, and I'm looking at you, Noga. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Awesome. So I have about 5 or 6 slides that I thought might help explain a little bit about the work that we do. So the organization that I work with is called Reset, and my official role within the organization is I'm the director of community. And Reset is a 7-year-old organization. We started 7 years ago, and the original idea was we would rent out a camp, like a summer camp for a weekend, and invite a bunch of adults to come. The rules were no phones, no work talk, and just play. And we did that for 5 years until the pandemic, and then things changed, which I'll explain a little bit more about it. But I want to just actually tell you, most importantly, about why we do what we do. Our vision is a world where adults, all adults, feel permission to just play. And what we mean by this is, as young folks, play comes quite natural to you. And it's something that is, I hope and assume, maybe a big part of your current lives. You may or may not know this, but the older we get, the less we play. And there's sometimes very good reasons for that. But as Noga previously said, there's a lot of benefits to play. Benefits as it relates to us having fun, benefits related to us meeting and making new friends, benefits related to us feeling good on the inside, to our ability to learn, and so on. And so we would like to, the work that we'd like to do is to support adults in feeling that they have permission to play. And so that's a real big reason as to why we do our work. And then the second one, which is connected to this, is the word just play. And going back a little bit to the story around my name, just play here refers to justice in play. Very early in our time when we were organizing summer camps, we realized that people had different experiences at our camps based on what their personal experiences were. And what that meant was it was very hard for us to create spaces for collective joy without justice. So just play refers to justice in play. And it's the type of play that we tend to do. Play is a very big thing, but we focus on play that is intended for connection, that is nonviolent, that prioritizes different access needs, and ultimately is play for the sake of play. And so this is what we do, and the way that we do it. This is slide the reset first. So I mentioned in 2015 we started organizing summer camps. We did cancel them for the last 2 years due to the pandemic, but exciting news, we're bringing them back this September. But when the pandemic happened, we decided we still wanted to do some form of work. So instead of doing out-of-town camps, we shifted our activities to within the city of Toronto, where we're located. And we organized pop-up playgrounds, over 50, at parks and public spaces that anyone could come to. And the idea was, how could we facilitate connection between strangers? A year into the pandemic, strangers, for many of us, were a source of fear. And so for us, we wanted to use play as a tool for reconnection. And so we started working on that in 2021. Not a lot to report here, but just interesting to note that also in 2021, we started working on a show. And I don't know when and if that show will ever come to full light, but it is something that we work on. And then also last year, we started working with organizations who were interested in how do they bring more play into their office spaces. Finally, this year, just a couple months ago, we launched our first physical center in the city, the Reset Retreat Center in Little Jamaica here in Toronto. And the premise of the space is it's a space for intergenerational play. So you're all welcome at any point if you're interested. And you come and you check your phone in a locker, and we're not allowed to talk about work, and we just play. And some of that play is play that we create, and some of that play is play that other folks create. Now, speaking of folks, for the last 7 years, Reset has been co-created by a community of people. And these people have all sorts of things that they do and belong to. They're artists, they're activists, they're creatives, they're researchers, and so on and so forth. And we have a board, we have a collective, as you can see there I am. And the collective, another word for the collective is this is the team. And then we have many advisors. And this is actually just, this is some, but not all of them. It is very important for us, especially as a reflection of our work around justice, to ensure that as many diverse experiences are at our table, helping us think about how can we ensure that what we do is accessible to as many people as possible. But while I have the privilege today of being the one to speak to you all about Reset, I hope what these last two slides do is show you that there are so many people, a community of people who are co-creating it. And what do we do best? We create spaces for diverse communities to feel safe to just play. Going back to what I was sharing a little bit earlier, for many of us adults, the reason why we don't play isn't just because we're busy and because we have work and we have other things. It's actually because a lot of us over time have developed a fear around play. That different, and it's not play specifically, it's just different things have happened in the world and in our lives that inhibit us from being vulnerable, which is what play requires. Because if you're playing, if you're dancing, if you're puzzling, if you're whatever you're doing in play, it requires you to put yourself out there a little bit. And the older we get and the more experiences that we have, it's easy to kind of to try and stay away from some of those experiences and to not be in a space of vulnerability. And so what we do best with our camp, our retreat center, our corporate work is we try and create spaces for people to feel safe to just play. So that is the end of my brief presentation. As you can see here, I've included the website link in our Instagram. If you were interested in learning more, you can learn more through there. But I know as well that Noga and I are going to have a conversation now. So I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about why you created Reset and why the community created Reset. Because like you said, it's not just one person, and it was a choice that community made, and you came together to make that choice. Can you tell us a story? Actually, before I ask you my question, I want to give everybody in your class, all of you joining us right now, just take a moment and see if you have any questions for Adil. You can put them in the chat as I'm going to start asking some questions. You can keep asking them as we have this conversation. You don't have to wait till we're done asking questions. We'll start as soon as you put some questions in the chat. But as you put your questions together, I'm going to ask you, can you tell us a story about a time when you knew you were doing a good job at helping adults play?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to tell you a story from this past Friday. So really, really recent. I was at the retreat center, and these two parents came in. I won't share their names or anything specific about them, but just so you have a vision, they were two parents. And they had two children, and they didn't bring the children. This was their night out, and they came to Reset. And they participated in a couple of our activities. The first one was a laughter practice, and then the second one was dance choir. And just so you have a sense, laughter practice is a conversation and activity we do around how to facilitate more laughter in our lives. And then the other thing that we do, dance choir, is an experience where people come and there's literally a live DJ for dancing. There's headphones you could put on for singing, and then there's just other forms of play. And so these two adults, parents came, and when they came, I asked them why they'd come, and they had identified that where they were at right now, things were quite hard. They had experienced a lot of grief, a lot of loss in their life. They talked about the impact of the pandemic, the challenges of being parents at this time. And the gentleman actually he had just pulled his back. So for the first hour, particularly during the laughter practice, he couldn't sit still and he kept having to stretch it out, and he was just in a lot of pain. He talked about being in this pain. So they came, we did the laughter practice, and then we did the dance choir. And what was so beautiful was seeing them both transition from this place where they identified feeling very heavy and in pain to the end of the night, where they both said how much lighter that they were feeling. And my favorite image is of this dad standing there in the room, rocking out to a song, and he just had his hands up in the air, and he was just singing, and he was singing. And I was like, an hour ago, this man couldn't sit still because his back hurt so much. And it was really beautiful. Among the benefits of play is that it brings a lot of light into our lives. And seeing these folks go from walking in with a lot of heaviness to seeing them leave with a lot more lightness, made me feel like we were doing a good job at helping adults play.
There's a question in the chat, and before I ask it, can you tell us what is a laughter practice?
Yes. So to answer, maybe I can actually just speak to the first question. Reset is a nonprofit organization. We identify as a nonprofit social enterprise. So we have emphasis on our impact work as much as emphasis on our enterprise work. And I'd love to chat more about that if anyone was interested, but thanks so much for your question. Noga, to your question about a laughter practice, some people, me being one of them, I really struggle to laugh, and I want to laugh more because obviously laughter is enjoyable. Um, and to not laugh, it feels like it's kind of like, if you feel like you're gonna burp, but then you don't burp and you hold it in, and it just kind of goes inside of you, and you're like, that wasn't really the direction the burp wanted to go. I feel the same way about laughter. Like sometimes I just want to laugh, but like it doesn't come out, and that means it has a lot to do with the fact that I've struggled over times to not feel my feelings. I went 20 years without crying, actually. And when I was younger, when I was 12, I once was told that men don't cry, and I was crying because someone had hit me, and I was told that I men don't cry, and I didn't cry for 20 years. And what that the reason why I share this to say, crying and laughter, they're both beautiful expressions of our feelings, and they actually involve a lot of the same muscles in our face. And so I noticed that when I cry, when I want to cry, my face clenches. When I want to laugh, my face clenches. And so the laughter practice is an opportunity for people to come, and we talk about our history with laughter, and often what are the reasons why we don't laugh. And I shared with you a little bit of mine. And then sometimes we'll just do some facial exercises and some stretches. If some of you, will stretch before playing a sport or activity, it's the same thing. Sometimes our face needs a bit of a stretch, and so that's what the laughter practice is in a nutshell.
And thank you for sharing not just what the practice is, but also why it's so important. And there are so many messages that we sometimes get when we're young, as young people, that really influence us as we grow up, and to your point, make it harder to play. And so much of being in a place where we're given permission to play can really help us as adults. So not just as young people, but as adults, break some of those bad habits we've built up over time. And so let's do this. We are going to take a moment to give you a time to chat with your neighbor in your class and figure out one question that you have for Dil. Because we had one question in the chat. We want to give you more time to figure out some more questions. So everyone, take a moment in your classrooms, chat with your neighbor. What is something that you found really interesting, something that maybe you're confused about and want some clarity, something you want to know more about? It could be about Reset, the organization. It could be about Dil, and also all of the experiences he's had building community in different places. So we're going to give you a moment to chat with your neighbors and get yourself or your teachers to put questions in the chat. So let's do that for 1 minute. And we'll give you a moment to think of what questions you have, given everything that's been shared so far. So, as you are going to put your questions in the chat, I'm going to ask Dylan another question, which is, we talked about belonging, but there's also about affirming identities because we are made up of so many different things and so many different parts of who we are. And you've already shared different parts of your family, where they've lived, what cultures they've been a part of, religions they practice, gender. There's so many parts to who we are, and coming into a place that can affirm not just one part of us, but many parts of us can be a really hard thing to do. But as you said, it's about just play. It's not play, it's justice with play, which is about saying that who comes into our space matters in all of who they are. And so, can you tell us a little bit? Can you tell us a story of a time when the community affirmed someone in their many identities?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm going to tell you a story about pizza, and not necessarily the pizza that you're thinking of in this moment. Um, so at Camp Reset, we invite people to introduce themselves via a nickname instead of their real name. Our real names, as previously mentioned, have stories to them, have importance to them, but we also didn't choose them for ourselves. And so we invite folks who are interested to share a different name, one that they've chosen themselves at camp. And for context, at camp, most people know me as Doc. And today I want to tell you a quick story about someone named Pizza. Around our third year, so we're about 7 years old, so still early in our journey. Pizza, who is an Indigenous member of our community, posted on our community Facebook page a request. And the request was for folks at Reset to stop using the word tribe at camp. We had previously not thought about this as an organization, but Pizza explained that the word tribe had important cultural history and relevance to her communities. And as a consequence, the use of it at camp she felt wasn't appropriate. What this led to was many conversations in Strand on the Facebook page. People sharing their understanding of that request and affirming it as happy to do that. And then there was other people who had questions, and there was other people who didn't feel that the request was appropriate. And what came through was some tension, and it was really the first time we had a significant fracture in the community. So much so that some folks even left, and for them, that was a moment where they decided this community wasn't the right community for them. But the bright light in the moment among them was seeing just how many folks showed up in solidarity by saying yes to Pizza's request and providing resources to foster dialogue. We always won't agree. The point isn't for us to all have the same opinion. The point, I believe, is for us to respect each other's experiences, opinions, and stories, and to figure out ultimately how can we respect each other and still ensure that everyone feels safe, supported, and in solidarity with each other. And so for me, this was a really affirming experience of Reset's values, of the community's values. And it takes work, it takes energy, it takes courage to stand by someone when they are making a request for their safety as it relates to their identities, for their needs as it relates to their identities. And a lot of people stood up and did that work and displayed that courage. And what they were doing is really just mirroring Pizza's courage to be the first one to say that in the first place. And so that's the story I wanted to share for that question.
You bring up something so important, is that the reason that when all of us who are here today, when you're thinking about communities in your school, we said it's not just about people in the same place, right? Because as a school, all of you are coming to your school because we have to, whether the school's in our community or we travel outside of our physical community. But just because we're in a place together doesn't mean it's a place for everybody. That it really is about sometimes the very hard work of making sure that we belong, that other people do that for us, but also that we do that for other people. And that I really appreciate you bringing in that it's not always easy, that it can take tension and conflict and somebody stepping up with courage to say something isn't working for them. And then as a community working through it together to come to a place where we can affirm someone's identity. And that request really is about history and culture and identity. And so I'm really glad that and honored that you trust us with the story of something that was hard for your community and that you're willing to navigate it. So thank you for trusting us with that story and knowing that we'll learn from it and take it into really good places and how we think about our schools. And there's another question from folks who are listening is, can you tell us about how many people come to camp each year? And it says on average, but you've also had camps that have been outside of the city. You've had camps now, the space you've had in the city. You've also done the playgrounds during the pandemic. So maybe tell us about those things. And can you also tell us with that, how do people hear about you? How do people know that you exist as a community and therefore can show up?
Yeah, so thank you. Thanks for both of those questions. I'll start with the second one, the last one you asked first. So there are things that we do that you will be familiar with. You know, I mentioned we have a website and we do Instagram. We're on Instagram, and there's a few other things that we do. But to be honest, most often the way that people learn about us is through what we're doing right now, and that is conversation and connection between people. Um, and part of that is a reflection of just who we are. I think that in my experience, the way that I have learned and joined communities isn't by reading about them online. It's by talking to someone who is in that community about their experience. So I think there's that, but also, you know, I only spent a little bit of time mentioning this, but one of the things that we prioritize in our culture and in everything we do is digital detoxing. And what I mean by that is when folks come to camp, when they come to the center, they're invited to put their phone away. Literally, we lock it away. And um, the biggest reason for that is that when we don't have our phones, we're able to be more present with ourselves and each other. I love technology. I'm not saying technology is a bad thing. In fact, obviously, we're connected today through technology. But our position as an organization is to think about how can we have better relationships with our technology in order to have better relationships with each other. And so this is a very long-winded way of me saying the way that most people find out about things in our world is someone's at an event, they take a picture, they post it somewhere, you hashtag it, someone else finds it, they're like, that's cool, but there's no pictures from Reset. So the way that people find out about it is relational. And that gets to the second question, which is not a lot of people have come to camp each year. The first year we started with 80. The second year there was 100. The third year 150. The fourth year 200. And then actually 250 in the fourth year. And then the pandemic happened. And so it's been a small group, but also that is entirely by our design and hopes. We've wanted to keep it small to facilitate and foster deeper and closer connections. And we recognize the impact of our work happens at our experiences, but it happens beyond. And community is bigger than the space that it's held within. All of you are part of your school community. And so some of that, a lot of that experience happens within the walls of your schools, but it also happens outside in the playgrounds, in your streets, in your neighborhoods, in your homes when we have each other over. And so we see our impact is happening well beyond the amount of people that come. And as of now, there hasn't been that many. But of course, we're still so young, and the way that we are thinking about our work is generationally. We're 7 years old, but we're trying to plan for 7 generations to lean into a viewpoint that we learned from the Haudenosaunee nations around when you create something, when you put something to the world, think about it from a 7 generational view. And then when you do so, we can hopefully better prioritize things like the environment and each other.
You bring up such an important thing that we need to think about when we think about even the communities in our schools is sometimes it's not just about more, more, more. Right? When you have a club at school or you put an event at school, some schools use fundraising as a way to bring people together. It's not just about having more and more people show up. Right? It's not just only growing the membership of the club. It's not about only raising more money for a cause. Well, all of that might be helpful. If we, as you think about your school communities and we think about our time together, we have to be thinking about what does it really mean for us to belong and to affirm each other, and what does a community look like that. And I didn't think about this when we were talking, that you're right, you don't have pictures. This isn't something someone is going to post and share with everybody. It really is through relationships that Reset has grown. And if Reset grows that way, it means when people come in, they come in differently. It's not just because they saw a cool picture, it's because there's something in the person who invited them in. And that is already helping me think differently as we think about our school communities. And so it might seem to the folks that ask this question about how many people visit camp each year, it might seem like a numbers question, but you've actually opened our doors and opened our minds to think about numbers, not just about the number, but how is that connected. And so really, thank you so much. We're going to give our guests one more moment to pop a question in the chat. If you have any last questions for our wonderful guests today, we're going to give you a moment to do that. And I'm going to ask you a question so that we can have another time for a question in the chat, which is, can you tell us about a time where you knew that Reset was a community, not just people in the same place, but actually a place where people belonged, where they were affirmed, but also where they felt that responsibility to other people? Can you tell us about a time where you knew that Reset was really coming together as a community?
Yeah. So one of my favorite activities at camp that we do every year is called the Untalent Show. And you may already do something similar. And if not, and if you like the sounds of it, it's all yours to do as well. An untalent show is like a talent show in that people volunteer to perform anything that they want in front of a group of people, sing a song, read poetry, juggle balls, etc. Except in an untalent show, as you may be able to imagine, you can't be talented in this area. And the idea is to normalize that it's okay to not be good at everything. And it's also, there's a special kind of fun, there's a special kind of joy that we get when we try something new. And it sounds obvious to say try something new, but it's actually harder, increasingly, especially as we get older, to try new things. So the Untalent Show exists for people to try things that they've always wanted to try, but may have been scared to try it, and to normalize the idea that they don't have to be great at it in order for a community of people to cheer them on. So one year, my sister Amira, who's come to Reset a couple of times, she really, really had always wanted to learn how to ride a bike, and she hadn't learned that. And so she came to camp, and a couple of other campers that she told this to helped her over the period of camp, help her practice because they had some bikes on site. And on the last night at the Untalent Show, Amira got in front of everyone in at camp in the auditorium, and she got on this bike, and the people helping her were holding it, and she biked around wobbly in a circle, and at one point they let go, and she kind of wobbled and fell, but she stood her ground. And overall, the entire time, the entire auditorium was just like cheering her on. And that's one of the things that good communities do, is that we cheer each other on, not just when we win, not just when we have achievements, not just for all the good things, but we also cheer each other on when we try. We also cheer each other on when we fail. The point of community is that if we, to go back to the definition Noga shared about belonging, belonging is being together in the good and the hard times. And so I think a lot about that time with Amira as a really, really big example where I was like, this is a community.
That's amazing. And because we wanted to have this conversation with you so that we can talk about not just the young people in schools, but what adults might need. Adults need time to learn things too. It takes time for us to learn. Just because we're older doesn't mean we learn fast, doesn't mean we learn easy, or that we have nothing to learn. And so making learning fun, which is something that we try to think about for young people in schools, but also for the adults in schools. How can learning be something that is fun, that people are cheering us on even when we're struggling? It's such an important thing for us to think about when it comes to the adults in our schools and what they need to feel like they can be in this community, because even adults, we're not perfect. It would be great, but there's no such thing, and we're not it. And so to create that kind of space is just so wonderful. And we're going to actually have you end us off with, can you show us some facial stretches and we'll all do them with you?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for the prompt. I'm going to we'll do a couple, and then for those interested, I just put a link to a YouTube video in the chat, where some folks have provided some more specific instructions around that. Um, so I think with the amount of time and space we have right now, what I would say is let's actually like not think about stretching for the moment. Let's actually think about the word massage, right? So what some of you maybe have done in the past is you may have gotten or given a massage on your shoulders, right? Why do you do that? Because your muscles are there and your muscles are quite tight. And so if you aren't already doing this, I invite you to mirror my actions right now. So if you aren't already doing this, just start actually on your shoulders. Give yourself a little bit of a self massage. And this is the most common massage that people know. Now, what I want you to do is now take your hands and go up your neck a little bit. So below where your hair starts, just on your neck, and we're gonna keep massaging, and you're gonna bring your hands now to your neck right here. And now I want you to rub them in circles like this. Just rub your throat here, right here. We do so much with our throat, and we never really give it much love. So give it a little rub, a little softer here. You notice you have to be softer here than on your shoulders. And now keep rubbing, but come up your face now. Come up your face, and where we want to go is right here. These muscles do so much, and you can go in circles, you can go in other directions, you can go a little bit harder here than you can go on your neck. And just give this area some love. These are the muscles. If you want to laugh, or you want to cry, or you want to feel other things, these are the muscles that will hold those things in, or they'll play with you. And so the looser these muscles are, the better. And then there's all sorts of other exercises, and you can free stretch now on your own. All sorts of other exercises you can do on your face just to pull and press. And I can literally at this point, you know how if you crack your knuckles like that cracking sound, I can do that with my face now. It's kind of funny. Comes with practice. And as a consequence, my face is just a lot more looser than it has been. And so again, there are many things online for you to look at. I've shared a link, and thank you for that question and that prompt.
Thank you to those that asked that question. I hope you all did that a little bit, and your face is feeling a little bit more relaxed and stretched as we start your school week. I wanted to say a huge thank you to our guest. You've helped us think so much about different parts of community, what it takes, but we said we were coming together because we wanted to think about what adults need in our community, not just the young folks, because as you all think about communities in your schools, right? They're adults as part of your school buildings. They're in the building, they're out of the building, and we need to be thinking about what they might need. And this idea of even just finding 5 minutes to stretch one's face, to do some laughter, right? How does that change our whole day? How might it change how adults show up in different places and what they need? And so I wanted to just say a heartfelt thank you to our guest for being here, for starting your week with us. It is such a joy. You have my brain firing off on so many cylinders, thinking about so many parts of community. And I hope to all of our guests who are here, you're thinking about not just what adults need, but also the play and the fun with play. And so we're going to end our time together going back to the very first thing I asked you to do. So we may have some guests that weren't here with us at the very beginning, and that's okay. I'm going to tell you what we did, and then you can do it and then do the second part. So when we first came together, we asked you all to take a piece of paper and draw a game that you love to play. I'm now going to share and show you what you're going to do with that. You're going to get into pairs. So you're going to find a neighbor and you're going to share the game that you like to play with your partner. So you have a game that you love and you're going to tell your partner about this game. And then you're going to tell your partner what you love about their game, and they're going to tell you what they love about your game. So for example, if Adil was sharing that he loved laughter as his game, my job as the person listening is to say what I liked about that. And the thing that I really like about it is the silliness, that to laugh, we have to be silly. And then what we're going to do with your partner, you're going to create a new game by combining the things you love about both games. So that's what you're about to do with your partners. And that's how we're going to end our time together. We're going to be on here for about another 5 minutes. As you do this, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. But really what's going to happen is you're going to chat with your partner. You are going to tell them about your game. Then you're going to tell your partner what you love about their game. They're going to tell you what they love about your game. And together you're going to create a whole new game given what you love most about both games. We call this a mashup. You're going to mash the best parts of both your games into a brand new game. And maybe you can tell Reset about your new game and they can play it at the Reset retreat. So with that, I'm going to put myself on mute. We're going to keep these stuff on. I'm going to say to our guests a heartfelt thank you. It was so wonderful to hear from you. We wish you a wonderful, wonderful day. And we're going to start talking to our partners and creating our new games. Thank you very much. We will see you soon. And to all our friends in our classes, start creating your new games with your partners with this wonderful mashup. I can't wait to hear what you create. Have fun, everybody. And we are so glad we saw you today. We're so glad we got to spend this morning with you. And we wish you a wonderful, wonderful day and a wonderful week. Be well, everybody. Bye.